Our surveys are critical to both knowledge development as well as validation. ODF and WW are engaged in these ongoing discussions with modelers and are eager to begin evaluation with remodels later this year. With that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Pleasant. All right, good afternoon, Chair Kelly, members of the board, and I complete work for students. For the record, and the policy advisor for the Forestry. Instruction stated, we're requesting the board consider a minor allocation layer for that nothing, which will verify when base school initiated, as a sufficient model was not available by additional content. For context, all briefly review boards will make authority of the applicable legislative processes. We're in revised statute 5.7710. The state law that grants the board limited authority to regulate forest practices. The board is included under this authority, or to administer the Forest Practices Act, and will hold a notice authority as he wants. And these authorities are tied to boards, the board's responsibilities and other aspects of the following purposes. Ensure that continuous growing and harvesting of forestry species. Provide for developments in air quality, water resources, flood protection, fish and wildlife. Specific species and resource sites, or reduce risk materials and bring that benefit. Will be adopted by the board, subject to Administrative Procedures Act, which allows for the APA process. The APA process. The typical state consideration process on state law involves filing the elections of the state law. The APA process also requires notes for fully complete file first members. Committees to specify timelines. Addition boards, commissions, and state agencies also adopt rules of government. And all those requirements layer on top of each other. Great people making process, and then in this case, the Forest Practices Act actually has its own procedure. Next slide, please. Forest Practices Act making procedures. And ORS 5.7714, the option 714 finding for requirements. And within the statute, it describes three types of rules. There are type 1A rules, which implement administration procedures for enforcement, but they do not directly regulate forest practices. So an example of type 1A rule would be a rule that would include committees being related to forest practices, or procedures for holding games, or how flood markets apply how you handle. Type 1B rules would provide definitions or procedures for those practices that are already set in statute. Again, statutes are pretty explicit and you're just mirroring that when you adopt the rule, type 1 rule. And then finally, there are type 1C rules, which regulate forest practices. The standards are the board has full authority and discretion to determine appropriate forest practice standards. That's when the board is tired. Before the APA knows will make an filing, or as I can send board to modify, the board must determine which type of forest practice will be considered. If the board determines that a rule type 1A, type B, type 1C rule, if that type 1C rule is only making minor adjustments to a rule already adopted, or if you contend with the APA process and there are not additional steps in the board, we don't complete the APA processes. However, the board determined that type 1C rule that changes forest practices, additional requirements tied to itself, and the board process, including the two. The meeting to describe its purpose and the level of protection desired. For the first APA comment period, the board needs to be post comment analysis and impact of the approach rule. And then also for adoption of the rule, the board has to determine specific facts and standards exist. There's some variation in the facts and standards depending on the purpose of that rule, or at least they've adopted under. But these I have really close to 30 in terms of the most common data by each degradation. So, next slide, please. I realize we're going to be behind you, but verifying phase 2 will be initiated as part of showing the minor finished rule, which are shown extracted on the slide. The changes are limited. The difference is accidentally limited work done, and you get the 2025 deadline, April 26 deadline. Next slide, please. Making required full text termination, the department recommending forest term proposed Oregon, Administrative, only cars 629, 635, 0200. The type 1A, because the law limits administrative procedures is more than the contract, and then only to enforce practices. And then if that recommendation one was to be adopted, only the APA process will be. Since the professional requirements will be passed, once the enforcement practices. The next steps was include the department filing, the APA must perform full AP, completing the required certification, include the public comment period. And then following the public comment period, the department then can turn on for consideration and hold their post-final board decision. Start adoption. With that, Chair Kelly, we'll get back to you. Great question.
Okay, whatever questions or comments? Please, go ahead.
There's two questions. What was the model sense of this message? So taking this action, I guess about some assurance that we will see the product that we look to see at the end. And so questions, one is, given the problems associated with verifying the model, what criteria will be using this going forward to verify the model at the same time?
Chair Kelly, moved on. Question, thank you. In terms of model verification, we have two different steps. ODA, along with the developed speech review criteria. One compares the accuracy of agreement between parameters and observations, so there's somebody to be able to put all of them in place now. And the other is more focused on that transition period between seasonal. The distance between the application on the ground based on render surveys and what the model is adjusting.
I think that's the follow-up to that, and I have you validated the landowner assessments?
Are you referring to, yes, we're only using approved, submitted surveys. Are you referring to on the ground?
Yeah, so when the landowner goes out, does not do a preliminary survey, and they themselves submit it. Is that verified by some other independent body?
There are some small fraction of those landowner submitted surveys are verified by the PFA biologists.
What do you find its accuracy?
Very, very high.
Thank you. And then the second question is, does the model consider climate change effects?
So we're hoping for 3 new models. 2 of them do not explicitly, third might. The problem with including climate change projections is it complicates the validation of the model. Because we're looking at past conditions. It's something that will be valued in the future. I think as we have more surveys coming in, climate change, those will be back into model development and will be perfect that way.
Just for follow-up on that one, haven't there been assessments like this done on federal lands? How does that seem to be involved? Or by the Forest Service, that you
Yes, yeah, they put all of our.
are not past data that get used to.
Yeah, I believe I'm not certain, but I believe the old crossroad model included prediction for climate change. The problem with that one was that the resolution was very coarse relative to the new updated state level here. So the crosswalk is very complicated.
Yeah, I guess my concern is, given the compounding factors that allow a lot of the bid works, you may stop over. And a very good community here. I struggle with having confidence.
It is certainly complicated. I think what I'm guessing we will go towards are regional submodels rather than Oregon or West wide model. We'll have a separate fiscal model for the North Coast, one for the Siskiyous, one for the Cascades, because of these very specific regional climatic, geologic, land use patterns. We're going to have to identify these appropriate models.
So Siskiyous use of taxpayer dollars. mean, it's fine.
Well, frankly, I don't think taxpayer dollars, well, the state taxpayer dollars have gone to it so much. Right now, it's been this independently. We haven't provided, we collectively, as the agencies haven't provided any money yet, directly for model development. That might change in the future.
Right, but you and your colleagues are being paid to do this work, so.
We're, just to be clear, we're evaluating the model that the other researchers are developing. But I guess I would say there's a lot of, a tremendous amount of resources being put in by landowners to conduct these surveys. Well, so we find a big balance in that.
I am a little amused by the rural language. It's like being Ohio State University as if the Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's good. I knew the PFA report calls for a low permanence model that's sufficient for regulatory purposes. I don't think anybody anticipated that the ultimate model would be perfect. What we don't want is for it to bias consistently one direction. And outside of that, they do like tailoring, your approach by area, different topographies and different photographies are going to produce different permanence models given the same kind of attributes in terms of basin size and precipitation. And so I think that makes some sense, but my only response to the colleague here is that, this anticipates another year of surveying every single stream. And that was, hopeful, we were hopeful in development of the PFA that we would avoid having to do that for too long. It's very expensive. And so we're going to be crawling all the way up these for another survey season in order to accommodate development of a more accurate model. And I think the landowning community is prepared to do that, provided there's some light at the end of the tunnel that we're gonna get there.
Thank you for this update, and I have no problem with changing the date. The model doesn't work, let's figure out a way to get the model working. How does this delay affect the overall PFA project? And the, pursuing the HCP, where's the nexus there? Is there one? Is there concern that this delay, the continuation for a year would have any effect there?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner, for the record again. I don't think it creates any delay or risk to the HCP. Surveys are still ongoing on the ground, which triggers the appropriate protections. So this was already something that's outlined in the rule. The way the rules are currently structured, surveys are still required until we implement this new path. So it functionally doesn't disrupt anything on the ground, but it would leave a hole in the rules and they'll update this as we try to move forward and have a date hanging out. So
Great.
I'll just make a comment from the landowner's perspective. It is very costly and well worth one time, but I will do this study. W very responsibly, so my region, getting out on the ground, staff, verifying. My land based assumption is very accurate. We know where the water is, it should be done for a long time. What's the model this did that very well, but W is very responsive on that. You know, data. Look at streams. They actually had me out shot. So it is a lot of work all the time, but the protection, question about.
Good.
Question, the follow up on, Brenda's about, use of existing title, information. This may be a question that's a little still out there, but you mentioned that you're looking at, lots of USGS and maybe for the contractor. Are you leading them to one or the other at this point and why?
We've evaluated one from the Forest Service, USGS, that was the one that we ran back in 2024, didn't meet our standards. So Out of the three that we have on the table, the two USGS and private contractor, to answer your question, no, haven't evaluated. We're hopeful that we will have them by the end of the calendar year and initiate our review early 2026. And the, this point, the hope is, although I'm not certain, was that we could have one finalized and approved by the beginning of the bill season.
Oh, great.
But no guarantee,
One-
no guarantee.
Once I understand.
Okay, has anybody got courage to put together a motor?
It's good, here, I need that.
Good.
Okay, Kelly, I move the board to determine that OAR 629-635, the 200s of 18, the type 1A. And to direct the department to file a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend the OAR 629-635, 200s of 18B as reflected in the background section of this item 7.
I will say,
I was so.
okay, we have a motion, on the floor and a second, does anybody, have, any, anything to declare? Conflict? All right, that will pull for, Liz?
I,
Hugh Curtis?
Yes.
And,
I,
for Justice?
I,
Elected?
I,
Brandon McCombs?
you know,
Question?
I just, since none of them have been evaluated or assessed yet. I just really am uncomfortable by extending this time without any real. Nothing to go on, just feels very, like we're really not there. So it's nothing against working with him, just.
Okay, and I vote, for this as well, so we have passed it on a 6-1 vote. I do not have that in front of me, but we need to restate the, you know, there you go, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, good, okay. And, so the vote motion was to pass, remember that OAR 629-35, 0-100. Like on a rule, direct department about of approach rulemaking and OAR 5 of the funding. That's the public. Yeah. Okay, we are done. Well done, thank you all. And next up is our legislative budget overview. All right. Okay. Welcome.
Getting it for that right now.
Well, good afternoon, Board of Forestry, State Forester Skinner. My name is Derek Wheeler, I'm Legislative Director for the Department of Forestry, and I have James Short, our Chief Financial Officer. So we'll be discussing the legislative session and budget overview, the presentation behind you. We've had the opportunity to discuss the legislation as it was going through, so here's our chance to check in on what actually landed. So if I could go to the next slide. I'll start with the legislation that the department itself brought to the session. That's two bills. That's HB 2817 and 2819. The first eliminates forest closure on forest land by what is called permit closure. So prior to this, we had regulated use, permit closure, and absolute closure as states of being on our forests, and we regulate accordingly by fire threat. What we found was that we never used permit closure as an option, and so we took that off the books with 2817. So functionally, the department's actions prior to this and after the passage of 2817 are the same. 2819 authorizes citations based on reasonable grounds that a violation had appeared. I remember speaking to you earlier about having walked up to an illegal fire, what you perceive to be an illegal fire, seeing somebody with a can of gas in one hand and a lighter in the other. And because I didn't see the person actually start that fire, we wouldn't be able to write a citation. So 2819 fixes that. After an investigation, a citation could be issued in that case. Go over to some of the other legislation that directly affects us. And my apologies, I put HB 494, that should be SB. This is a DAS study for classification and compensation of our forestry and wildland fire positions. A well-needed study as we're looking into expanding our workforce, keeping our workforce competitive with some of our other agencies, whether they be federal or structural, and keeping our workforce, which is a big thing for us. We'd like to have seasonals move into permanent positions, et cetera. And so this study that resulted from SB 494 was the first step in that process. So that passed, and the DAS has actually started on the study. Last week, they finished studying the wildland dispatcher portion of those positions. So that study is working out as we speak now. And then I don't think I have to speak much about SB 1051, which transfers the authority to appoint the state forester from this board to the governor. I'm sure a lot of discussion has been had with that. So if I could go to the next slide, please. One of the major bills that was tangentially with us was help for the RFPAs, the Rangeland Fire Protection Association. This year and specifically last year, we got a lot of help in initial firefighting from the RFPAs, and it gets expensive for them. They do their work out of pocket to protect their lands, and it gets expensive. And so what we wanted to do in conjunction with the RFPAs themselves was do two things. One, make it easier for them to get our old equipment, and two, get them some money. So 3349 did both. Essentially, what it does is it allows the department to control the disposal of our equipment. If our trucks are old, our staplers are old, we can control the disposal instead of going through the normal DAS disposal process. So that lets the department take our used equipment and give them over to the RFPAs for their use. It streamlines that process. And secondly, the bill created a Rangeland Protection Association fund. So that's a fund that was populated with $1 million this year to go for the expenses that those RFPAs incur, gas, firefighting hose, etc. So they have found it very useful, and that was actually a governor's priority as that moved through. So that passed well. And then moving to the next slide, please, is a bill that I'm hoping might be the last time I have to talk about for a while. This is SB 83, having to do with the repeal of the wildfire hazard map. I've spoken to this board for years now about the progress of the wildfire hazard map, and now the final repeal. It was an interesting day to say the least when that vote was taken to repeal it, but for me it brings some closure. So where did we go? And what does the bill do? It had to remove wildfire hazard map from statute, and the hazard map itself was originated in 762 in 2021. And after those years of legislative sessions, it got baked into other policies and statutes. So untangling the provisions of that map from other provisions was a difficult task. Things like accessory dwelling units, property disclosure forms. It just got baked in a lot of things. So we had to untie that. We had to remove the mandatory regulatory structures that were associated with that. Map, of course, created zones that were high, medium, and low in hazard risk, and if you were in high, you were subject to defensible space and building code provision. We had to untie those because not only are the zones gone, but the mandatory regulations went with them. But what was important about SB 83 was what got kept. We kept the building codes and the defensible space codes as model codes. So they're not mandatory across the landscape. But what we heard from city leaders and county leaders was they would like the option to use both defensible space and building codes in their localities. So they needed something to look to. And so those provisions were kept on the books. And that's what's remaining there. I'm done with the wildfire aspect. Next slide, please. And then the biggest bill for the Department of Forestry, of course, the session was 3940. The goal of 3940 was to achieve long-term and durable funding for our wildfire mitigation and response in Oregon. A lofty goal. We had set a target of around $300 million to achieve everything that we needed, from mitigation to suppression, you name it, across our department and OSFM. It was a lofty goal, and as we went through the session, I can say that it got challenged. So I gave a few briefings as we were going through the sessions, and I gotta be honest, I don't remember what I said the last time. But I will say that as we were approaching near the end of session, at least with about a month left to go, the 3940 had pretty much had kind of stalled out, to be perfectly. Oh, exactly, yeah. So it had sort of paused, and it took a Herculean effort from the Fire 35 members and a number of folks in this room to lobby very aggressively with our lawmakers to get that back at the front of everybody's attention. You may recall that the transportation bill had eaten up a lot of steam in the Capitol, and so we were competing against that. But we got it back on track, and one of the most fundamental issues with 3940 was, okay, you want to raise quite a significant amount of money. Is that going to be new money or old money? And so some of the funding mechanisms that we brought to the table and discarded, others were what we ended up falling on was rainy day fund, which many legislators looked at as existing money. So we would be taking out of that pot. Well, to get more or less clearance of using existing money, we needed to come with a proposal that had new money. So they had to come in parallel, and near the end of the session, the idea of what was colloquially called the ZIN tax came. And so that would be a tax on those tobacco pouches that you may have heard so much about. And that was ultimately what we got out of this session in terms of mitigation funding. So we successfully got 20% of interest from the rainy day fund, and a new ZIN tax of about 65 cents per can on that tax, which starts January 1st. A lot of people have asked. So that is where we secured long-term funding for our landscape resiliency fund. That's where it went for the Department of Forestry, and for the Oregon State Fire Marshal, it went to their community risk reduction fund. So these are all our mitigation funds that we can do proactive work to try and keep fires small, or so we can be better prepared if we're going in the future. And that is money that will be reclaimed, and we will start seeing that money. And I will say that that 20% of the rainy day fund and the ZIN tax, especially the ZIN tax, was somewhat controversial with health advocates, but both of those will be revisited. But as we go to bed tonight, that money is there and will continually go forward. But that is simply for the mitigation fund. I'll get to the rest of the funding in a little bit. The second part of 3940, of course, was landowner rates. When I first took this job 3 years ago, there was the landowner offsets. And then last year was House Bill 4133. Trying to get our landowner rates to an affordable place for our landowners has been a continuing theme. And I worked diligently to try and get them to a good place. And one of the crowning achievements of 3940 is we achieved that policy victory for landowner rate reductions. And so what we got was policy changes that are more or less based on the detachment of centralized administrative costs from the local landowner assessments. The state will share a greater share of the burden than the landowners. It's important to note, though, that those policy changes, specifically those, take effect in our next budget cycle. So those come into being in the next biennium. Also, out of in terms of landowner rates, we got a large wildfire fund. So right now it's not populated with anything, but looking forward, that will be a place for our wildfire funds to live. And we also got an increase in the forest products harvest tax, specifically for, suppression. That's moving from 62.5 cents per thousand board feet to $1, and all of that money goes into our suppression costs going forward. A fourth bucket, 3940, was for rural fire protection districts. You know, the Department of Forestry is hardly in wildland fire alone. We work closely with OSFM and with our local structural partners. And what they have found is that there's a number of lots across the landscape that they do respond to, but they don't collect on. And so part of 3940 was raising the improved lot surcharge and the minimum surcharge, so they can actually capture some of the costs for lands that they are already taxed. And then the last bit of 3940 I'll bring out is the treasury funds, which is a massive, I think a massive win. We had to go to a special session last year because the department had simply run out of money. We carry all of the costs of a forest fire season directly on our books. Eventually, the legislature pays us back, but it's a huge burden on us to carry that. And as we saw last year, we simply couldn't, we had to have a special session. The point of the treasury loans is that we can go to the treasury first and have the treasury loan us that money so that we can have the carrying capacity going forward. Again, then go back to the legislature to square up costs. So I mentioned that we got partway there in achieving long-term durable funding. We certainly did for mitigation funding, but we fell short in other arenas. So I'll go to the next slide. Was the Christmas tree bill, where a lot of money came into our coffers. This is all in one-time funding. So this is not long-term. This isn't durable. These are funds that we will have to go in the next long session and resecure essentially. So all said and done, it's about $195 million in this one-time funding. That's 24 million for our severity program, including our aviation costs, which was a raise, a much needed raise, as aviation costs have gotten significantly more expensive. We've got $7 million in mitigation funding. That's on top of the sin tax in the rainy day. So all said and done, the department got about 21 million in pure mitigation funding. 9 million for immediate landowner rate offsets. I'll talk to that in a second. 4 million for wildfire cameras and 150 million for a special purpose appropriation for natural disaster response. And if I could touch on that one first, that's 150 million specifically for natural disaster response. That's not money directed to the Department of Forestry. It's not money directed specifically to OSFM. That is money for all disasters in the state of Oregon, whether that be hailstorms, earthquakes, tsunami, wildfire. So that's what that pot of money is for. Certainly wildfire will take a huge chunk of that. But that's what the state has to deal with in the immediate term for this biennium to carry some of that money forward. And I said I'd return to 9 million in immediate landowner offset rates. That is a function of how 3940 is written and drafted and passed. I mentioned that landowner rates and the detachment of centralized costs from the landowner rates take effect in our next biennium. And that's true. And also our forest harvest tax, that starts immediately, and we'll start saving money. What we've seen is that, okay, the policy changes don't start for 2 years. So this year we would have a hole in terms of landowner rates to reduce. So we have a hole for our landowner rates. So there was 9 million there to backfill the difference between the policy changes happening in 2 years and what we'd like to see today. So we've got landowner rate reductions as we speak. Next year, as we're going forward, we will see reductions or increases in the forest products harvest tax for suppression. We'll also see minimum lot surcharges, and that revenue will also go towards rate reductions. All said and done, the full rate reduction package does start and is fully functioning by next biennium. So I didn't want to dig too deep on the 5006 because that is the realm of my colleagues. So I'll leave that there and turn it over to James.
Wow, you've done most everything on my presentation, so there's not much left I need to do today, so I'll keep this short and guys, so we can move on to other things too, but good afternoon, everybody, Chair Kelly, and I'm with the board, for the record, I'm Jake Short, the Chief Financial Officer. And I appreciate the opportunity today to speak with you about the 25-27 budget. This budget reflects some of, over a year collaboration within our agency and the legislature, executive branch, and our external partners of some hard work that we move forward. And it represents a shared commitment to keeping ODS stable and preparing us for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in this uncertain economic forecast that are coming up here in the next couple of years. So let's go to the next slide, and this is our LOAD for the next biennium. So this is a comparison from the first column is comparison of our 23-25 LAD to the last column of the agency's current budget. It's a $144 million all funds budget increase. So it's quite substantial investment by the legislature in the agency. We have general fund increases from 167 million to 184 million. From LAD to LAD, lottery funds actually decreased. The majority of the primary, our lottery funds are for the service to debt service for the LA State Forest. Other funds increase from 23-25 to 25-27. And then federal funds nearly double. And majority of that is for from one bank to the next for federal funds for grants work. Federal reimbursement. So overall, our budget is a $720 million all funds, which is quite an investment for the agency. Positions do increase from 1,393 to 1,412 positions with an overall FTE of 1,080 FTE. That includes seasonal and permanent staff. Next slide, please. And this just is a comparison between our agency request budget and our final LAD fully submitted for, and what the board approved at our agency request budget back at minimums offsite a year and a half ago to what we actually the legislature approved. But next slide, please. So several key policy packages that were approved I wanted to highlight. First is package 104, this is the workforce development. This package, investment will help us strengthen our training, improve our retention, and align our classification and our workforce development program, human resources. And these are all critical in supporting our staff and our agency mission. And this is we repurposed vacant positions and established this group, and there was actually a decrease in 0.25 FTE, but it actually increased the 3 positions overall through the repurposing of vacant positions in administration and HR. The next one is the package 105. It is the expansion of the urban and community forestry program. This is a $28 million federal fund increase for the urban and community forestry program. And this is for grant work and the agency has received for the UCF program and Forest Legacy program, Human Forest Resources program. Package 106 is the third one. That's the transfer of our payroll services unit to DAPS. At the beginning of the biennium, it's an administrative administrative policy options package that transfers our payroll services to DAS. DAS is now our agency payrolls provider for us. They provide all our payroll services. We do not have a payroll service in the agency right now anymore. So moved positions and some reduction of 2 positions to DAS. Finally, we received capital construction authorization for 5 projects for the agency. First one and number one, capital construction project for the agency was Toledo relocation to the city of Newport. This is phase 3 and final of that. $6 million of bonding authorization. The next project is the North Cascade Stanniam office replacement that was burnt down in the 2020 fire season. The agency received $5 million of bonding authorization. The third package in the capital construction was the Klamath Lake District Fire Cache in Klamath Falls. So that had that was burnt down in an electrical fire for the fire cache. That received a $5 million bonding authorization. And package 111 is the State Forestry building restoration. This is the building B, the $1.5 million package. This is for beginning of minimal restoration work on the building. Keep it into what we're calling asphalt maintenance mode. Do minimal restoration work that from not decaying before, and so we figure out what the agency and the priorities are for this building and move forward with it. And then finally, package 112 is Western Lane campus facility improvement. The $10.7 million of bonding for this program, and it's shovel ready to go for the Vineyard campus. Next page. This is just the detail on these exercises, the details of everything that Derek went through on the narrative, but one item I wanted to talk about in detail was the private forest report and the governor's signing letter to Senate Bill 5521. That's our budget bill. The governor included a specific direction related to the private forest report. Funding in package 801, that's the first 2 lines at $4.5 million and the $2 million for adaptive management and best fish. That package provided $6 million support to ODS administration of the PFA effort, and most importantly, to advance the state's application for HCP plan under the Federal Emergency Species Endangered Species Act. Of that, $3.1 million is identified for new research projects at the Institute of Natural Resources, and $2 million is designated for additional grants under the Small Forest Land Investment in Stream Habitat or SFISH program. It is important to note that about $2.8 million from the prior biennium remains unspent and is already available to continue ongoing research at INR. Because of this, the governor has directed ODF to hold the new $3.1 million for research and the $2 million for SFISH grant until the HCP application has been completed and submitted for federal review. The governor's letter makes it clear that all allocated funding must directly support completing the HCP before it is applied to other PFA-related initiatives. And once the HCP is submitted, ODS will consult with the governor's office on timing and sequence for releasing of these funds. After that consultation could be accelerated. A clear and immediate need rises to release a portion of the funds to directly support the HCP petition. And in closing, I want to thank the board once again for their guidance and support. Budget conditions ODF to fulfill its mission throughout or its force and serve the communities across the state. I have any questions from the board. Thank you. And, okay.
So I don't know how government money really works. Yeah, you've got all these bonds that you're getting out. How do those bonds get back?
Through debt service.
Yeah, but like, where's the money for the debt service come from?
So it comes from 2 funds, some general fund and other funds. And the other fund bonus comes to, depending on which district it is in. It's what's used, totally perfect example. That is coming through the private forest, our Forest Resources Division and the local fire protection landowner assessment.
So landowners are gonna pay a fraction
Yes.
of the debt service on those bonds. So how are the POPs developed? You know, I've asked that question before in the past, like, how does the board get involved in developing those POPs? Because when they came together last time, like, it came together fast and it came together between board meetings, and to the degree that landowners are going to participate in paying for those bonds, it seems the Board of Forestry should have some role in development. How do we inject ourselves on that process?
So for, I believe. The 25-27 or 25-27, but our schedule wasn't.
Yes.
Not, yeah, I believe. But in previous. Biennium, the agency worked with the board through the board, through different timing and the board meetings to work with you on development at those times. For this next coming biennium budget bill, we'll do your next board retreat. We have a set of concepts that we're bringing to the board. And then we have already developed our 15 development that we do and APM that we are going to bring forward for your guidance on what we want. Great team.
Well, that'd be great.
I had to start, but really what has happened.
Yeah, that's an important step, and I guess if I had one to ask, it's that we make those concepts available to the public in time for them to inform the boards. Because those landowners may have, and frankly, just people, in those, just may have opinions about what should and shouldn't be prioritized.
So on capital projects, we take the input of the local budget committees, from landowners on the, especially on the protection side, and in those, and their recommendations on those, from their budget committee, support those policy action on the capital projects. So there's input from that. For example, the Western Lane project,
Yes,
that would, their board is fully supportive of that. It would not move forward to the policy option package unless the local. It's the Western Maine board or the association and not supported that for it.
yeah, that's great, and that's an important step. And as for the other pops, of course, I have opinions on those too, which I will be glad to share with you and given the opportunity. I do. Now I'm in.
Go ahead. Then on for the record, I appreciate this wide-ranging overview and, an impressive collection of funding that we ended up getting through a complex session. So thank you for all the hard work to get us here and to report on it. Quick question about my pet project, which is the Forestry office building.
Yes.
I appreciated your sort of plan on that 1.5 million. It's basically keeping it alive, it sounds like.
Yes.
What's next? And we'll obviously talk about this when we get to that, but is this part of a larger plan or is this just hanging out on itself?
It's part of a larger plan. I have the two-step list of what is included in that 1.5 million that we move forward for. So we have a detailed plan, of what the 1.5 million will encompass, and then what the facility, the agency facility, what they have the next steps after that. But this was just to move the 1.5 million to keep it from not falling down and become inhabitable, inoperable for the agency.
So I guess just a quick follow-up on that. Sounds like the facilities group has a good plan of what needs to happen. Is there a funding plan beyond the 1.5 of how we? Was this first investment by the legislature contingent on future investments that we might expect from them?
So, go ahead.
You may answer that.
I step in, I
Yeah.
feel like I just had a little bit of my push. So at one point, there was a $22 million ask, right? And as we just talked about the bonding that we have to pay back by program. And that was not something that I was willing for our agency to take on additional payments of debt services there. So this 1.5 is really, we have a very prescriptive what it's gonna be And then part of that though is we need to decide what that building's gonna be. Does it go back to being a state forestry building? Does it become the museum? The museum moves, does it become something different? Because it is such a unique building, it's on the historic registry. It's very, it's not great as a work environment. In the world that we work today, you know, and today. So, part of this effort is like, we have physical things that need to happen. And so we do need to decide what is going to be the use of the.
I give tonight's thing to include only in our retreat, a discussion on that. And I think the one component of all of this, given that building, is that we gotta get government there. Period. Which we tried before last year, we're unsuccessful. I talked to her, and she told me, well, yeah, I can do that, because I used to sell real estate. I know unless you see it, you don't really, that's, you know, I think not taking away from figuring out how we can use that, all that to add to. But at some point, we have to something else there. And then we can get it on done. And, go ahead.
So I'm not sure how much people are going to buy them for everything. But if you look at all the buildings around this campus, and also the one, it's part of. Is that possible?
I think it has to be part of the consideration, just things that happen there. And there's such a, but you know, there's events a pet project, but there's such an interest in it. I think there's potential investments, but I don't. The mechanisms to make that happen, I don't know. Okay.
Did you, Kelly, see?
I'm thinking of an amp thing. I was. We were on the table. Other questions? Okay. Derek, congratulations, and I hope that the next state forest will keep you on. All right, great, that's, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. We're right on time. And we did keep a half hour honestly, talk about what will now be our favorite avoid planning. I think, this is make sure that, we still can put life in context. I don't have any script for this conversation. So we can take as little or as much time, as we want to, what we do add, and
I'm gonna let Kate lead. That's.
Yeah, so Tim and I were talking, and we wanted to just kind of have some stuff out there, to kick this off. You've identified a lot of it today, right? So, the KPM piece, that's a critical high priority. Workforce, the rulemaking piece, getting a little more education and rulemaking and what that looks like moving forward. And then also, the POPs and budget, that was another one, that we need to, the timing will be correct in us getting input moving forward on those pieces. And then I think the other one that Tim and I talked about a lot is, in attending your meetings for the last year or so, there's been a lot of desire that I've heard from all of you about strategic planning. So like POPs, budget, all of KPMs would all go into the strategic planning, but Tim's been doing a huge effort with our staff around what are all the other, like, we have to do the forest action plan, we've got connections to all these other plans that are out there. Trying to identify those, but also lining up, what are all those pieces, what are all those timelines, and how do they all connect to the overall structure, our priorities and our mandates. And so that was a piece, that I have keep pushing forward, that I would like to walk the board through as part of that, as you look towards the future, and look towards the work you want to do. So that's what I kick it off with, and then we're open for a discussion about what you would like to cover, how you'd like to structure that day. And Elizabeth, I'll leave this. Are you ready for some brainstorming? That we're up there, yeah. Okay. So this goes, I don't know if this would be a big topic, but it's like there either maybe after. But a couple of years ago, I remember Ben Sharp saying, when are we gonna get some young people on the board? And I did not take offense for that personally, actually. But I think, it has been thinking about our organization that was and vision. And maybe putting some effort into how do we keep a sustainable pipeline within, our support of ODF? And how do we make sure that we connect with a lot of wonderful organizations that are thinking similarly? And, I know that we are looking at the budget and our heads are down and we're looking at, but I think that any organization that we continue to be successful in the future wants to keep investing in that. So I just want to, maybe take a look at the horizon and say, how can the board help ODF and connecting with educational organizations, that we know that are out there that can that have done the heavy lifting that we can latch on to. So that's an idea for the future.
Well. That, I'm looking forward to this meeting in February, and I, a couple of thoughts, but a few right off the bat, I'm really even for the session on rulemaking, and I think it should be a multifaceted session, not just in education, what our duties and what responsibilities are, but I think we as a board, I think, could have an internal conversation about how we want to engage with rulemaking. And I think there's a robust conversation for us to have there. And I look forward to that. Happy to provide more detail, but that's what that is a placeholder. Also, as the new chair of the board governance committee, which I have currently done nothing yet, but have intentions to, we have some work ahead of us to update our board policy manual in the face of SM 1051, to bring it in line with the current state. And I intend to, with I go remember on that committee, work through some of that this fall, so that I expect that we will have something substantive to bring, whether that I'll communicate and whether that's January or February, but that's, I think, an important and robust agenda item that to be.
Yeah, we have to, formally, if you have proposed, changes, we have to have a function where we look at those. Then, another meeting will be back to vote, so the actual retreat, could, we should be talking about it then, in terms of,
Jack, just want to follow up on Liz' comment about engaging with academics. Here we are, sitting in one of the world's top research universities in Forestry. But yet, when the questions arise at board meetings, especially trying to vote on things, we're making some assumptions about what's real and what isn't when it comes to the information that we use to make decisions. We have a much closer working relationship with not only this university, but other universities in Oregon nearby. Be that and Humboldt, something like immediately bigger close. Make sure that we engage with the people who are cutting edge of research in these areas and get their perspective on things before we make a vote based upon assumptions.
discuss will be how. How do you do that?
Invite them to our, ask them, what do they think, to get them engaged. Because historically, the Forest Research Lab was funded to provide exactly that connection between ODF and the university. That connection is, I would say, eroded significantly over the years. We can try to figure out how to bring that back in a way that does not take advantage of the faculty at universities, but does. Like to that, maybe?
Yeah, I have two thoughts, leaning into the, rulemaking process, I feel like, to understand that more, and also tethered lobby might be one of something. But like, maybe the next rulemaking board engages in, something talking about like a work plan or how the board wants to sort of lean into that rulemaking process. Just, again, lessons learned from this past process. I don't know if that could be part of a conversation at board retreat. What do we want to see at the lobbying? And also, it sounds like we'll have more interaction with the governor's office, and it sounds like there's a desire for more communication between the board and the governor's office. I think Chandra will be at the retreat. So I don't know if we want to talk about how we want to engage more as a board. Or any.
Oh, I think it's, yeah, it's a needed conversation.
Yeah.
So, a couple high-level comments. One, having attended some of these board retreats, planning retreats, and I think it's very easy to bite off and whether you can chew. I personally would prefer we go deeper on fewer items than to try to just listen, frankly, to staff talk to us over a whole bunch of different items. And we never actually get into it. Unfortunately, Chair Kelly, I think that's going to require you to say no to ideas that you suggested today. And in that vein, I would like to suggest another one. I really do think that in the past, the agency has, and this is years ago, I haven't been to one in quite a while, but we used to have like work plans by division that talked about, here's what we're going to accomplish, here's how much we've accomplished, and here's what it's gonna look like going forward. To me, that's kind of helpful because it kind of brings up the board's work too, the kind of timeline we're gonna be on. And I guess I would encourage some more of that. I haven't seen those kind of like red, yellow, green roadmaps in quite a while. And I feel like that might be helpful to the agency and frankly helpful to us in conceptualizing what's before the board.
I think it's so in agreement with you.
Yeah,
That same thing, very much the same thing. This board is not a lot of work last of years, and we have a lot of things to finish. We have to get those things across the finish line, right? And focusing on the things and maybe talking, reaching out to the department heads about how they building that work plan, how we're going to interact, right? What do they need from us, right? What does staff board and when, and that can facilitate it. They help so we need to meet. If we only have to meet 4 times a year. If from somebody it's hard to do that, hey, we can do this. It's difficult to get these meetings. The more efficient we can be with our time and our spend and having retreats and how to play that out and populate that out. I think, we're potentially going to have somebody a state forestry from state forestry, give them their support of us to make that happen. We're going to be transitioning brand new state forestry. So how do we support their work in that work plan from a forest perspective? I think he's really hit on something there. How do we move our heads kind of work plans, and then we can interact and interface with that, see what we need to do. We might be surprised that I think that just really focuses our attention on getting this good work done.
I totally agree.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
I'm sorry, we pulled together, thinking we were gonna be in October, we had pulled together those work plans, and so we're down the road because I agree, that was like a big thing.
Yeah, we had in that retreat, provide input into that, how we see, and then go one step further, say, how much are we gonna need to balance it, and how much time is required for us to get input on the
I think, so on that topic about trying to gel and look at what we've done before. And maybe it'll be a transition for our new state forestry, but it will also be, I think, over the last few weeks, or 3 board members. And so what I would like to do is maybe carve out some time to say, you know, somewhere for the important things for the rest of us, you know, have to take forward. You know, reflect back on your, gosh, 8 years and think about that. I don't know how we would do that, but I would hate to miss that opportunity. This is what we can do, you know, part of our considerations. And so if there can be a way to do that, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, to keep things narrow and deep, as it said, rulemaking and work plans seem to be pretty important things to dig into and kind of a whole lot of that. I think having a debrief with us, all people who are moving forward, is something that I think we do. I agree. Probably in the line of years. Yeah. Right, but I've got a question for you, Tim. Rulemaking. Under what circumstances do you, Parliament, or the governor's office include a board member in a rulemaking committee? And under what circumstances don't you? And what are the criteria?
So it's an excellent question. I've been thinking about it for probably 2 weeks now. For the record, Tim Holzbach, the current chair of the state budget. In 2021, the department with the passage of Senate Bill 762, at that time took on the amount of rulemaking all at once that the department had not seen in decades. So that was one of the reasons why, and knowing how that the House Senate Bill 762 finished in the legislature with a 11th hour special committee meeting and pushed some of those high profile items out. That was the one of the things that prompted me getting some of that legislative instruction there, also with the interest of the board at the time as well. So that was one that kind of spurred it. It was not a common practice, but that was a very nuanced opportunity that came. Not knowing that the department would be undergoing significant rulemaking every biennium for the next 3 or 4 years as we have it. So it was new. It was something that to help have the board have a connection. And I know working with Jim a lot on the hazard mapping rules and some of those definitions, and that was monumental to getting that through the process. And to assist. So there was a significant value that it hasn't been, there was no trigger necessarily, or like it ran good.
But that would be something that sounds like these standard practice and visual or not.
I think there's opportunity for that. Some items that do come through are very explicit in statutory direction on rules. This and some of them where there may not be that decision space for the heart of policy making with the board, but there is a connection there of value of having the board. I remember I think you were in the certified burn manager group, and I know you were present for most of the meetings, and I had popped in once in a while. Jim was present for some of the others, and but it was more of what I think where the value was that it created awareness when we have the rules advisory committee of the board, and the meetings are public meetings, they're publicly noticed, so any board member, as long as you don't create a quorum, can watch them. So but it created, it was a connection with the board, had a desire to engage and be aware of some of the politics around the rulemaking. And when you came to a decision point, it was, you already knew what kind of the landscape was. It was a little bit of an interesting dynamic for the board following along and spending time with the department.
So here's what I'm taking away from what I'm hearing, and see if this is right. There's a real interest to keep the topic list short. And so I think we're talking rulemaking, key performance measures and work plan. And, on work plans, I think that conversation, for me, is interesting, because all the years I've been on the board, one of the themes is, oh, well, the board at some point said that we're going to do this, and that must be in the minutes of some meeting 12 years ago or something. And, and one of them is a board work plan every year, and I don't know that we ever done that in a really well-defined way since I've been on this board. I don't know if it ever was done well. I know that it's somewhere out there. If people, Bob and I came out, where's the work plan? Where's the work plan? And and that's a theme on not just work plans, but throughout, I think, this whole agency and board, it's sort of a long history of saying somewhere, and it's now very hardly anybody remembers that we're going to do this, and so on. They just get off. And then I know a little bit about it, conversation. And am I summarizing correctly? Or okay. Any other?
I hate to belabor it, what is, what we're gonna do on rulemaking, like separate and apart from work plans?
I think what's been talked about and correct me is that I think the conversation manifests are with the change with us not being any longer hiring and firing at the state forester, having that responsibility. So the conversation was, well, what authorities do we really have? And I think I was hearing from one thing really clear exactly where that authority starts and ends. And I heard an interest in taking a particular project, either the past or the future, and going a little bit deeper, using that as an exercise for us to all make sure that we really understand our responsibility and our authorities better than.
That's a big part.
I think it's back to last response.
Anything to add to that?
I think we can definitely work together towards making a topic that's of value and prompt some discussion.
I'm hearing from Tim on the key performance measures that I think you guys are going to touch with the meet on the phone from the stat side of that. So we have a place to start. Yeah, so that means, meanwhile, board members, in terms of each of us should individuals be looking at those things and how to successor as well, how to not, what would be better, and with the course being mindful of what can you measure. But started out, we have something that being measured very poorly in the fourth question.
I bet not absent food leadership. I bet this board could spend 100 hours debating the nuances of the agency state games. And so, like, I think it'll have to be a more confined and structured conversation. And which means I did some pre-work and then educating us about the boundaries of that conversation.
Not volunteering, but they having a board member work with them. Same.
Yep, Jim. The only other thing I heard is that the board members that are not cycling off are going to buy a lot of drinks. So we want to open them up in the evening, and so that they,
Right.
Okay, I think we're done with this item, and we'll take a break. And that is 2:45 for the Department of Education.
It's good luck.
Maybe done for 4 days, but for
Or retreat. Yeah, I just want you to know you're doing a really good job back there.
Well, I don't know about that.
Demanding circumstances.
I would be happier if our technology was more cooperative,
Story of my life.
but we
Oh.
can't control it all.
Are there microphones like in the ceiling or something?
White things.
Oh, yeah, those guys there.
I can hear.
Oh, very good. And can you hear us online? Can people hear us?
Some of it's pretty quiet. It was louder when the mic was laying on the table,
Oh, right.
but this is the main mic.
Gosh, seriously? In like Zoom, you select that one? That's not good. You need to be able to select the ones overhead.
That's the one they have a few.
Okay, that's right.
All right, welcome back, everybody, and, we are now going to, listen to the presentation on the, parking implementation as part of that climate pollution fund. To that, John, and, yeah, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, member of the board, State Forestry Center for the record. My name is Tim Washbach, I'm serving the from the State Forestry. With me, as Chair Kelly mentioned, is John Carson, Resource Planning Manager and Danny Morlander, the Forest Climate and Carbon Health Office. And we'll be providing a presentation today on the natural.
Yeah, thanks. I'll hand it at the end. Let's move the driver on both receipt of funds and the direction to which they're allocated, but, in response to the question at hand, today, just an update to the direction for that funding, which was provided several years ago, has been directed towards, and in some regards, some of the challenges in realizing the funding of those funds, but, there is a excellent trajectory that's been developed out of the cycle place, but following accordance with what we report to the OPEC body and the receipt of funds.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I am quiet. I apologize. Well, I'm used to the microphone, which I don't think I speak into very well normally anyways, so part of it course. No, just reiterating the comment from Tim in regards to providing an update on the capital we're spending for the funds that we received for the National Working Lands. In our portion of those funds from ODF relevant to the other natural resource agencies that received the funding as well. So ours were directed towards by the smart forestry applications, and also for the tribes as well. And to date, there's been hardiness, I guess, in the realization of that spending, but nonetheless, there's well pathway going forward, and there has been a good allocation of those funds into Sea Orchard, on the climate smart landscape that we're run, and then also with tribes, there's been a good pathway and identified. Period. So, but to give some perspective on the funds, the availability of what they're directed for and some history, of how they were received and what drove them. As noted, Danny has been, I guess, the point for the National Working Lands and Climate Action Commission work in that regard. So, a good overview of both receiving funds, but also the allocation.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, member of the board, and State Forestry Skinner. I'm Danny Norlander, I'm the Forest Climate Carbon and Health Analyst. Go ahead to the next slide. So the presentation is split up between kind of background of these funds and process and what we have achieved and where have some time to question. So the background in 2023 legislative session, House Bill 3409 was passed. And that established the National Climate Solution Policy and a Natural Working Lands Fund that went to OLEV. So this is a very broadly distributed process, as I think that you will start to see. So there's 4 agencies that actually receive funding for this, identified in the bill. Those are OWEB, ODFW, ODA, and OWEB is the one that receives the initial funds, and then those flow to 4 other agencies, depending on process of stuff that goes through the Forestry Climate Action Commission, which is housed within ODA. So in 2023, we got an initial allocation of $10 million to all 4 of those two total to those 4 agencies. And then we went through a process of creating a proposal with the governor's office, and that was presented to the Climate Action Commission in 2024. They approved 13 projects across all 4 agencies, and then we started working towards achieving those. In order to do that, we had to go back to the legislature in order to get other fund expenditure limitations approved in 2024 short session, which we did, and then we could finally start the process of moving the fund from OEB to the different agencies and start working on that. So that whole process took from the long session of 2023 through that first fiscal year. So it wasn't until around July 2024 that we could actually start utilizing any of those funds. And then each year there's an annual report to the legislature on September 15th. So Climate Action Commission has their September meeting next week, and that will be presented there. Next slide. So the fund, the holistic fund, aims to provide incentives, technical assistance, and financial assistance to advance natural climate solutions. So each of those agency funds are actually referred to as Natural Climate Solution Fund. We were supposed to prioritize programs that would further environmental justice and tribes, and then also utilize existing programs if possible and leverage as many federal investments as we could. And then the last part of that was to optimize social health, ecological climate resilience, and economic co-benefits of natural climate solutions. So it's not just sequestration, it's not just atmospheric carbon removal, it's looking at the co-benefits of all of these. Next slide. So the role of the Climate Action Commission, as laid out in statute, is that the commission determines the amount to be allocated to the different agencies, and they can base that on the ability of the agencies to be successful there, and if there are other sources of funding. It consults with the agencies prior to decision making to understand both uses.
Oh, there we go. Is that the right page?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then to review the progress of barriers to implementing natural climate solutions. So that's where their biannual reports come in. And then coordinate on the development and implementation of those natural climate solution programs and activities, including things like metrics and the policy around what those funds go to, things like that. And as I said, the Department of Energy is the one that supports the commission in those duties. So they have staff that do those annual reports and all sorts of other stuff, and can set up the contracts to do things like a natural working lands inventory. And I'll get more into that in a minute. Next slide. So where did all of this kind of start? And we're going to roll way back to 2021. And that's when we had the Oregon Global Warming Commission, which in 3409 became the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And they put forward a natural and working land proposal. And that included a whole host of things. And it was done somewhat in tandem with the climate change and carbon plan. They were being done at the same time. And then we kind of leveraged the public input that was happening in both spaces to get a more broad view of where things were. It did have public input. It had approval by the OPWC at the time, and then it was done in August of 2021. A lot of you will probably remember development of the climate change and carbon plan also in 2021. That also had a pretty lengthy public process involved with that. Make sure that we had a good representation of voices from around the state. And that was finished in November of 2021 and incorporated some of the proposals and also some of the goals that were in natural proposal from the OPC. Following that, the Global Warming Commission partnered and contracted with the Institute of Natural Resources to create a national working lands kind of roadmap. That's that blue one in the middle. That was done in mostly 2022 and really became somewhat of the basis for the following legislation. That was 3409. So 2023 legislative session 3409 was passed and signed by the governor. And then that created all the funds that we're talking about today, which is that last piece there, that last page. And that was the proposal that those four agencies put together with the governor's office and presenting to the Climate Action Commission to be approved. Like I said, there were 13 different projects in there from those four different agencies, and with a pretty broad range of ecosystems and communities served, a whole lot of other things. Next slide. So project metrics, I know that we're always curious about metrics. So metrics for tracking outcomes really come out of that INR report and what they were suggesting we could look at. And that included things like acres treated or restored by treatment type, seeding, planting rate, density by species, ecological function repaired, and then seedlings grown, especially for some of our projects where we're looking at how much seed we can grow at the seed orchard. And then opportunities for bidirectional learning. So that's like if we want to integrate traditional ecological knowledge, how do we make that so we are doing technical assistance both directions? How are we learning from tribes? How are we helping tribes? So those are some of the metrics that were included originally, and those will probably change somewhat over time due to some of the contracts that are being put in place by ODO. Next slide. And that's where we're kind of headed now. So this is from the Climate Action Commission website, and it just shows the various projects they're undertaking right now. And those natural working land ones, there are three different ones. So the natural working land workforce needs study, the natural working land land-based inventory, and the natural working land metrics are all due to be done either at the end of this year or early next year. And then they have other ones on there too, but not specific to that. Next slide. So the Natural Working Lands Committee is providing input onto those various projects, those various contracts. I just wanted to show that there is a broad set of constituents included on that. Some of them overlap with us in forestry, and some of them are so the three different contracts that are being done is the net carbon inventory. So that is underway. They have a contractor in place and they've been working on that. The workforce development and training program needs has also been, that contract has been awarded and they are working on that. And then the metrics RFP, so that's looking at community impact metrics and also ecological metrics. With that should be, I think it's in the final stages of that contracting process. So that will be starting up here soon, and that will help feed into things that they want us to measure, including the things that were listed early. So, and then those will be very tailored to Oregon specifically, and not just using, for instance, the SID tool from the EPA, which uses national average. Next slide. So ODS part of it, we've got $3.25 million to work to increase adoption of climate smart forestry, as we outlined in the climate change part plan. So there's two different projects. In ODF, we have $1.5 million to increase in implementation of climate smart forestry on small, non-industrial land, advanced communities. We have $1 million to incentivize climate smart forestry tribes and traditionally marginalized landowners. And then we have $750,000 to build capacity for climate ready seed and seedlings at the Schroeder Seed Orchard. Like, so these are all underway. The seed orchard, we are doing a variety of things to make it so that we'll have future ready seed, climate ready seed. And this one was really put forward as about like a 20-year project looking forward. So what can we put in now that we will need in 20 years? So some of the things that we're working on is a management and harvest plan for acorn bearing white oak at the seed orchard. So there's about a 2-acre parcel there that is mature oak, and we wanted to be able to start collecting acorns from that so that we could try to increase the number of white oak seedlings that would be available. Increase irrigation and water supply planning. As climate shifts to a more variable climate, we may need to increase our irrigation on some of the seed orchards. And just really just planning that out, which hasn't been done a whole lot in the past. And then partnering with the Forest Service on their new future climate ready seed orchard that is going in. And then the last part of that is ensuring that we have the infrastructure in place to protect the seed that we have. So things like making sure that our freezer is up to date for our seed storage. So there's about $14 million inventory of seed in that freezer right now. And if there was like a power outage that shut down the freezer, we could potentially lose a lot of seed. Next slide. So the things that we're working on are completing the allocated projects. There was a attempt to get more funding in the 2025 legislative session. So there was originally about a $5 million ask. That was not funded. So we're still going off of the 10 million that we had originally. And all the agencies, all 4 of the agencies are still extending that to beyond most of our original intended spending plan. But there have been, it's all taken a lot more time than any of us expected. So we want to work to increase the interest around the state in connection with the local level. The whole kind of point of how this was built was to really focus on the local level and place-based planning and what do the local communities want for their response to climate change. How are they going to implement the climate change and carbon plan at the local level? So in the future, we also we have some refining proposals that we'll start putting together in case we did get some additional funding. So we'll keep working on those if we get for future allocations. And then the other thing that we're looking forward to in the next year is revising and updating the climate change carbon plan and what that looks like in relation to the Natural Climate Solutions Fund that we have access to. Next slide. So that's what I have. We have about 10 minutes left. Right on where I was hoping. Oh yeah. Ben Ludling for the record. Thank you for that great presentation and a very helpful explainer on how we got here. I found that very useful. As I think about the work that you're trying to do and trying to think about how to have the biggest impact, and also think back on the climate change and carbon plan and a report last year, I think in Pendleton last year, when we sort of talked about our climate work to date. The big meat at that conversation and seems to still be is capacity for technical assistance. And I saw that was one of the bullet points of the work what this is supposed to cover. And in particular, for the most progress that has happened to date has been in Washington County, where I have a flat fee program that lost ODF sports from staff. What would it take? I don't know how much this is to the two of you or the Kim and Kate to use some of this funding to pay for a petition. Not to administrate this fund, but to be a program technical assistant, help implement this work on the ground, because I think for an increment perspective of how we have the biggest impact, giving out some grants that will affect a handful of acres is nice, but being able to scale this work in technical assistance with a position seems like it has the potential for much greater. So is that a possibility? And if so, what would that be?
That's an excellent question. I think the board in January kind of helped provide some of that framework or work vision plan. That's a big one of the 5 goals of that vision. And to see the climate change carbon plans, the implementation of that. So as we work through moving the board's vision through the department and making it more inherent to how we conduct forestry work, it helps spread that beyond just a single point of reference. Single point of reference of folks who, workforce moves that occurs. This allows for folks to be able to everyone to help carry that and spreads that information throughout the rest of the agency. So it may take a little bit to work through that, but it's as we work through, and as Danny mentioned, of updating that plan that provides the implementation for vision, and then kind of a framework for staff to implement as they work with their local government partners.
Quick follow-up on that. That sounds like a long-term plan. I think that's good. This funding, but there's a particular couple $1 million that we currently have to spend, and some of it has been spent, and some of it has not been spent. What I'm hearing from you, Tim, is this is a long-term strategy. I guess I'm asking, can we use some of this $8.5 million, if I added it up correctly, for a position like this? Because I don't know, I think what I heard from you just now is your answer would be something in the future. This money's here right now, and don't do this, it'll get spent, and then you have to ask for more. Can we utilize this fund for this?
Yeah, a portion of those funds are available. So 10% of funds are available for realization of proposals as laid out. And so in the original, actually within the original request and people budget, there was the position attached there to more or less realize that function faster. And while it hasn't been realized, the funding, the nice thing is new funding in a lot of regards, because it doesn't disappear into your, not by any means, and it draws interest. So as Danny noted, everybody has found themselves in the same boat, ODM, ODF, and us, in terms of the projects are just, it is fit, and also finding how to fund capacity. And in like any legislation, we end up with, 18 months to spend 24 months worth of funds, and that in this case, we're going to 12 months more or less. And so that's challenge. But to the point, the breadth was there, and we can see where it competes. I mean, so yeah, 10% of what's available are of the funds itself. You know, for some efficient capacity to provide that education and that technical fitting. Which was nice, honestly, was a big pickup from in Washington County. With the work that Nate was doing for sure, and which would have been, idealized to continue and it is now still actually, but to answer your question, yes. So that was long, sorry. I ran around the block like 8 times to get there.
I think I would just comment, I share, I'm really interested that these dollars be as transformational as possible. Also, I recognize, as board members, making kind of suggestions that we're kind of getting into, inside of the operations here. And so just wanna, make sure that they're all being conscious of that as well.
And
Just for my own information, Danny Johnson. Yeah, I think the devoted to climate smart forestry and implementation. Season.
Implementation specifically.
Yeah.
it was just like,
So it's probably more so blended into people's position descriptions and their duties as opposed to a singular point person.
I was like, looking at point.
It depends on the position. So like our urban community forestry position, we built that program out a lot into the federal grant. And we are utilizing the tribal fund here to help, so they're gonna help us to expend those, so they are directly assisting as part of their broader work. But they also like look at that plan. And Rob.
How about state boards, how that they take into the CCCP and get into what they're in state boards?
he's long gone, like, big bucks right now.
Yeah, I was thinking a little deeper about your question, actually, beyond just piece, or, going program by program, but thinking through, the providing technical assistance, we heard from community plan enforcement owners earlier today. Providing technical assistance to landowners across forestry in general and supporting them and providing them educational and generational change impacts to the multiple and then the owners in particular, but these concepts, climate smart forestry is new to them. It's forestry in the long term, but it's still new. We have similar when we do wildfire reduction projects and the why and the how and how you work with that. So a lot of time is spent with these new things when we have this new fund appointed spending it. A lot of time when we're talking with folks to get it in the ground, and that's why a lot of it is committed to soil and water conservation districts and to our tribal partners in that, because it amplifies the reach of the department. But the words we work with our landowners in the ground, because they have a little bit of time to do that, and it does take a little bit bigger one.
So here's my reaction, and I'm sorry if I'm crossing the jerk, but sounds like that implementation plan is by the city of Camp, so you don't have a good now clear direction. How are you going to spend time and money to have the maximum impact in terms of climate smart forestry, forest lands across the state? With only what, 2 FTE, is that what I'm hearing, for 1.5, something, I don't know, number of names, gets back to Ben's point. But, if you're gonna make an impact, there needs to be this duty assigned as FTE more than just 1.5. And, when did you finish the CCCP, what was that?
November 20.
So 4 years, and here we are again talking about, implementation and I appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I mean, this looks good, especially working with the other agencies. But I know a lot of stakeholders out there that are wondering what the heck is going on with CCCP, and what progress is being made, and I don't have an answer.
The one, I mean, it's an interesting question, and I'm thinking specifically with some state forest, but I do know that at least as far as like being certain on how many perspective, which is an interesting question, but in terms of informing and driving perspective and planning operations, there, at least within the state forest side, there's been significant amount of influence in terms of farming avenues of their planning and their operating. And so. In terms of, you know, any major, this is a broader conversation, certainly. But at least as far as realization of what rather than what the synopsis, difficult to identify and answer it only, but thinking the broader arc of intention, certainly, I.
So I think,
Yeah, quickly, I just wanna, I have a question, if I have a question, and we're last time, I think we looked at where I think, as we look at.
I just suggest that you document this and get it in one place where it is here to that or something.
Just, yeah, so there's an argument, with what Brian said, and then, I would say most, when a stakeholder reaches out to me, like, I would say 90% of the time they're asking me about CCP, everyone's really excited about it. And the number one question is, well, how is it being implemented? And so I just want to relay that feedback that people are really excited about it, and they just want to see, that happen. And that funding, some sort of position, project manager, technical assistant support, I think is also, something I hear often. Just want to reiterate that.
I was gonna highlight that we use these words, climate smart forestry, like there's some established or set definition of what that means, and that's not true at all. I think that even the CCCP is kind of like a word that, it's like people see what they want to see, and those words are pretty high level and not very specific, and so. You know, I do have some questions about what we are advancing in terms of climate smart forestry through expenditure of these funds. I don't really know what we're getting at there. I think some people would shorthand to lengthening locations, but I'm not entirely certain that's climate smart in every circumstance either. And so I think there's a sophisticated question to ask there about what climate smart forestry is that needs some reckoning before we begin building a really big plan around advancing it. Otherwise, we may be pushing down an unexpected path.
Yeah, I thought it was okay, or please go on, great, I thought.
Right, exactly. What are we doing to implement?
One thing that I might help you by the next time is we have these other history agencies, organizations, what have you, and I'm wondering what they are doing, if they have the mission of defining and less plan. Different things, all sorts of attention, maybe differently.
We all have.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
We're still here, we're still awake, team.
What did you sleep?
I had, welcome, and I don't think we're used to that, so we might be stay there.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. Hope you've had a good day so far. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to come and join you. I know you're headed out on a field tour shortly, so it's almost as bad as being between, finishing a long day and a reception. In terms of if the next guy off and move on, but I'll brief, and I think the ideal was, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, was just for me to give a little update on things since we last met. I think I joined you all in January, and there's a group of panel from OSU, and so I thought I'd just do a little update on things happening in college, and then open it up to questions. It was that or a lecture on climate smart forestry. Whichever you prefer. Well, let's do the update. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tom DeLuca. I'm the Dean of the College of Forestry, and we're really pleased to have you here in the building in Forest Science Center today. We are very proud of this building. It was a product of a lot of generosity of donors from across Oregon and beyond. It's a beautiful building, and it is highly functional as well. Now we're on the cusp of building the third mass timber building, or completing the third mass timber building here on campus, and the fourth, if you include the Cascades campus. So that's pretty amazing. We just a 5-year period. If you haven't seen it, the Plum Collaborative Innovation Complex is being built on the north end of campus. How many you've been by there and seen the construction? Please say, you should maybe on the way up to the tour, just drop by. The sad thing is they're gonna clad the whole thing in brick and cover up the beautiful wood, and the wood will still be there, but it'll be under a layer of bricks that are strictly aesthetic. And but are historical, matches with the historical brick construction on campus. But that will house the number 3 supercomputer in the nation, which is a gift from NVIDIA to OSU, and it opens up enormous opportunities to advanced data analytics and AI and robotics on campus. There's a big investment happening on campus and getting cracked for this gift. And it's one of those gifts that it's a big deal, you know, it's a $50,000 supercomputer, but it's going to cost us $100,000 to get it up running, you know, fully staffed. So, but not looking at gift horse involved. It will provide incredible opportunities here. So anyhow, let's see. I think there's been a lot really gone since we last met. I'll be brief, as I said. One of the key things that's happened since we met was that we took ownership of the 12 Mountain Forest, which is just north of Portland. It was a Weyerhaeuser forest plantation, and had been managed by Weyerhaeuser for roughly 30 years, I believe, and had been in industrial management prior to that as well. And Weyerhaeuser gave trust for public land basically the first right of refusal on that property, with a hope that it will be retained as a actively managed forest. TPL turned to us and gave us the opportunity to manage it as a research forest, as a gift to us as a research forest. So we worked with TPL over a 3-year period, and ultimately it all came together, mostly forest legacy funds and also Portland Metro funds that funded the purchase of the property. And it will be a self-sustaining, actively managed research forest, and which is has an enormous number of opportunities associated with starting as a traditionally managed short rotation plantation forest, and being able to contrast a whole range of different treatments on your landscape, and demonstrate what we can do in forestry in peri-urban setting, and engage with K through 12 students around forestry, and forest management. We also, Weyerhaeuser had maintained a contract agreement with the Northwest Trails Alliance on the property for a mountain bike network that is still highly actively used by mountain bikers in the Portland area, and we are maintaining that relationship. And I think it's just a really wonderful demonstration of the total compatibility between recreational pursuits and actively managed forests. So we're happy to have that relationship, and we're going to also include hiking options that are safely divided or separated from the mountain bike trails. We're going to hiker. We hired a number of positions, and actually we over the last year and a half, we've added positions in urban forestry. We One was a partnership with ODF, as a matter of fact, but we hired two extension and urban forestry positions, Jennifer Killian and Sarah Lowe. And we're really excited about having that expanded capacity. We have a lot of interest in urban forestry. And we have an online option in urban forestry and our natural resource degree as well. And they'll really help expand that as well as maintain it as our existing urban forestry specialist has indicated that they plan to retire within a 2 to 3 year period. We also hired an indigenous knowledge, natural resource and indigenous knowledge specialist, Florencia Cardenas, who's a botanist and forest scientist at Minnesota, University of Minnesota, as a postdoc, and we recruited her here to lead the college this last year. So really excited about her joining us. We added this was now more than a year ago, Pat joined us as a watershed extension specialist. We have a new Christmas tree management specialist, and Priya Rajaparu, and then we just added an entomologist, which I think we've got a lot of interest from ODF about. When are you going to hire an entomologist? Well, we finally hired an entomologist in John Riggs, who pulled away from Mississippi State University. So he was a well-established faculty member there, and we are really excited about him joining us. And he's off and running already. He started this summer and has already has grad students up to work. We also have a forest applied genetics position in Gancho Slavoff, who was a grad from here, but is currently a professor at it's been at a number of different institutions, but he's a professor of forest genetics at Everest University in the UK. Or a professor of genetics. We have added a number of, we have a pretty strong online set of offerings, online course and curricula offerings to our natural resource program in particular, both at the master's level and at the bachelor's level. We just added to that, we put our trail degree online, which is our tourism, recreation, adventure leadership degree, and a wood science and engineering professional master's degree. And we have, other degree programs that are harder to put online are those that are very much hands-on. That's forest engineering and our forest management degrees. So those, we have not yet made an effort to put that online, but we have developed a certificate program within forestry that is so you can get an online certificate for a set of courses in forest management. The online masters in wood innovation for sustainability is really the only program of its kind in the nation. And we see it as a huge opportunity for those folks that came into the wood products industry from a different discipline, like business background, or came in from a natural resource background, and have good business skills potentially, but don't have a strong background in wood science. So we have two different options within that degree program. We're really excited to see that take off. We have had an incredible increase in our enrollment over the last several years, and we had growth in our enrollment even through the right through the COVID years. But last year we had 9% growth in from the previous year, and this year we had 11% growth coming into this autumn. Yeah, There's truly amazing growth within the college. A lot of the growth over time has been in the natural resource degree. It's our biggest degree program with this whole set of options within it. But the forestry degree has been growing really strongly over the last 3 years as well. And we've had growth in forest engineering and in trail this year. Let's see, we awarded 304 degrees last year. That was the largest, graduating class in history. And over 900 in the past 3 years. And we had we have the highest 6-year graduation rate at OSU at about 78%. And that is unusually strong for our first generation Pell eligible students. It's closer to 90%. So we're really proud of that. Our transfer students actually achieved a 100% first year retention rate. So that's also really great. The university is really keen on retention rates right now and increasing our graduation rates. It's one of the parts of their strategic plan. So I feel we've positioned ourselves well in that regard. Our research awards and productivity remain high. They declined of about 10% in FY25, which isn't surprising given that we also had a number of grants terminated by the federal government. So we had roughly $6 million in federal grants terminated, and then we had a $4 million grant rescinded. So so we lost about 10 million in federal grant support that was already had previously been awarded. That's frustrating in terms of we have to bridge those students and try to get them through, and we're using internal resources to do so. Some of the grants that were terminated didn't have students associated with it, and that's a little easier. But nonetheless, it's created some challenges for us. But in spite of that reduction in our total awards for 2025, we still are closing out with over 24 million total awards for this last year, which is, if you look at back 5 years, we've grown very remarkably in grant success. So let's see, I think that's about all I was going to share. And in terms of just things as updates on college, if there's anything you were curious about that I didn't mention, this is very simple update. Please go ahead and ask. I'm happy to stick around until you're ready to keep on your tour. And thanks again to tomorrow morning. I thought you were starting one this afternoon. Oh, let me get my other. Any questions or anything that I didn't discuss? Yeah, Brenda.
Yeah, Tom, earlier, we were thinking around ideas about things we would like to see going forward in our retreat. One topic that I raised, and we could address with, is we have decision items coming before us all the time, and oftentimes we're always looking for good, reliable information on which to base decisions. And common enabler as well is one of the best forestry programs in the world. Where we are right now, is there a way to tap into knowledge your folks have to help us make more informed decisions?
Yeah, the short answer I would give is absolutely yes. I feel like they're absolutely yes. And just as an example, when we started facing some of the challenges that were coming forward from change in administration and some of the big changes that have been, initiated through, executive orders and through the, passing of the beautiful bill. And through the, executive orders for the grant commissions, we put together a committee of, or a team of scientists that sort of cover the gamut of, areas being affected by, some of the federal initiatives, with the idea of being able to be in response mode to any like legislator that might come to us with, questions or, agency, heads or whatever the case might be, that if there was a question where we could put one of our experts or a set of our experts up to the task of either acquiring that information or if they had it directly at their fingertips, we would do so. So we put together this sort of task force or team to do that. And we, used them only a couple times so far. There was a set of questions that came up about how are the tariffs going to affect forestry and forest products and exports here in Oregon. And so we were able to come back with a reasonable set of responses using, I think, what we felt there, the best available numbers that, and so I've been invited to provide testimony in DC to a House subcommittee next week, and so again, that team had provided a bunch of input that we use in preparing testimony. We also wrote a letter to Secretary Rollins with regard to the reorganization of USDA, U.S. Forest Service, and that team provided input on that letter, and that is also used in.
So I just follow up quickly, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
So is, for your team, is that part of their, work, their responsibilities then? Or is that?
It's a service responsibility, so it was a committee assignment that I opened up without, it's voluntary, so it wasn't, they weren't appointed to it, and everybody that I brought it to agreed to all, and I didn't lean on. It was a voluntary.
Is that something that could be done for the, or ODF and the board?
Yes, I guess that's what I was trying to get to, is that this, we've already put together this team. It might be that we tweak it a bit or, expand it a bit, and that could be a team that ODF, or excuse me, the Board of Forestry turns to when they have an issue that could benefit from science-based information.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for my cryptic presentation. I was glad I intended to get back to your question.
So who would be the point of contact?
I think Shannon Murray would be the best point of contact.
Just a quick question. I mean, are university scientists, in your view, the only appropriate scientists that we would reach out to? If not, are there other institutions you would recommend or organizations?
Well, it depends on what information you're looking for. Like even this group, we're not only looking inward for, this group doesn't just look inward for information. For example, when the question came up about the tariffs, we, with regard to things like pellet exports, we went to Westport and asked folks there, and just drawing a blank on the name.
I mean, the reason I ask is that I feel like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like there's a desire to have scientists kind of call balls and strikes on, science we're leaning on for purposes of decision making at Board of Forestry. And in my experience, how you view the science and how you characterize it sometimes depends on the institution you represent. And universities come with their own biases, and so I was just trying to figure out how we could make representations of the science holistic and well represented.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, and I would like to think that we don't come with biases, but of course, there are, our job is to generate, knowledge based on practices, scientific approach that aims to minimize the influence of your own biases and the outcomes of that, of the science that you're conducting, but that's only your own science. More important is collecting that corpus of information that exists out there and providing a balanced perspective to you all, not one person's opinion or one person's research experience. There's been, there's so many great examples of that in sort of popular press where they say, oh, we have this science, we're sharing the science of two sides. Well, they're sharing two people's opinions about the science that they have conducted, and they're not actually looking at the corpus of science that's been conducted and providing a meta-analysis or something on the subject. I'm not saying that this group would provide a meta-analysis on everything we did, but I think that the idea could be that this group could be tasked with, could you provide the input on this issue, giving us an overview of the science that's been conducted, not one person's science or not just from. But I understand you don't want. It's totally possible that an individual at an institution or a group at an institution is biased about a topical area because of science that's been conducted here and they're influenced by their specific set of outcomes. So in such a case, it's obviously possible to look to other institutions in the region, Idaho, Washington, Berkeley. Yeah.
This was a conversation that went down for 7 years. I thought for forestry, and I don't think we're gonna solve it. Thanks to but anyway, I feel like it's valid on the city. Challenging. Be part of our job.
Yeah, so I think the more simple answer to Brenda's question would be, we're here to serve the state of Oregon. And we're here to serve the board. So if there's places where we can provide input or provide our science, or provide a perspective on the science that exists out there, we're going to.
Well, so for me, it's, not just about science and how we receive it, and, I've heard some courses, but I also think the thousand largest, innovation, and so used to a lot of, different opinions and perspective. But I think what I can get back as a leader is that I think, listen hard, I'm trying to understand as best you can, and that what I receive it as being wrong. I don't usually just have, it's like the here that we get. Put it in there, there's your answer. But put it in the context of the decision making. So it helps me kind of, take out and put some objectiveness to it, exactly, the purpose here of the decision. So that's why I look at it as being, I think that, I will just share what I look at it as.
That's good. You have to interpret, look at what's provided to you and interpret it as best you can and utilize.
Any other questions? Well, in that case, we really appreciate you coming, it's very long way.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your little experience.
Yeah.
We're really happy to hear, well,
Future is some.
great. All right, enjoy your tour.
We've got up to closing comments, anybody, anything unresolved or anything that come up during the day, but there, discussion, I think he said, and just.
Really full day, after a lot of decisions. Thank you everyone for your patience, and I just want to recognize Denise on her first run.
Thank you.
And just have your patience and, calmness through all the glitches, which were always found in. Thanks to me.
Right. I just had that, I argued for, probably 10 years that the Board of Forestry should have a UHA present in meetings that would be really helpful on legal questions and actually call some of those balls and strikes on what the law says or doesn't say. I also wanted to offer, since I was so vocal about that for so many years, I didn't know that he needed to be here for all of them. And so I think we may actually pay the DOJ by the hour. And to the degree that that's true, I just wanted to encourage you, Mr. Chairman, I would defer to your judgment about when you thought he might be needed for the agenda.
That never been my idea, son. Thank you. We'll talk about that. Yeah, take part in that. Okay, Ben.
I got a question, from our last agenda, the previous agenda item with, Don and Danny, I guess I'm curious, I want to make sure I wasn't overstepping my bounds, getting out of my lane. What I'm, because, I had some suggestions about hiring an employee, or position. And I'm taking a comment, we, or need to stay not in direct management of the department, that's not our authority. But I also, I'm unsure about what our role is in the Jedi. The climate change department plan is a board plan, board put together. And I guess I'm generally unsure, like, is this a place where we can listen? What sort of feedback is expected? What sort of feedback might be taken seriously? I don't know. And if we suggest, or a board member or two suggest, maybe you should create a position, does that go anywhere? Is that useful? Or is that, are we just here to listen? I guess I'm unsure about our role.
Yeah.
With that, because I don't want to overstep. I don't want to be annoying board member, but I'm just curious. So
Let's move to human, please, that we all start. It's just natural to care about something that puts that mind. You've all done that, and I think, doing myself, I was. We used to sort of have the brain, well, at the end of the day, we're firefighter to say, of course, we're going to have bad things, of course. So, that's all make it a little bit more challenging question. I think a challenge in that particular situation. The big one there really don't have the authority.
Can I make a comment related to your question? I think it's going to be really important, regardless of our state forestry. It's always going to be very important for sport to have a strong relationship versus an SC. And I think the question you began to bring up is really how I would, as sport purpose, I would interact with state forestry. A question. They're in charge of running day-to-day operations. Department, here I have something for you to think about. guess on this whole question, where does board work happen, right? Does it happen in this meeting? Yeah, or is it, you know, and Jim's right, sometimes we, in a nature, we gotta jump down something. But that's, I guess, that's my advice. I think one thing we didn't talk about in the retreat is for them, I think the person in that seat and what they was in that seat and that relationship with them. So,
So maybe thank you. Okay, what do you expect from the board in? for that?
Well, there was a couple things, so that agenda item came up because we got some public comment asking us what's the status of this work. So that was one piece that Jim and I talked about, we want to push that back out publicly. And then, the other piece too, of bringing up the FTE and positions, I think I always come back to like, we need to be able to demonstrate to you, right now, we have this investment money, and folks are putting that on the ground, but, we need to demonstrate to you like more consistently, I think is part of it. But like, here's the dollars, here's where we've invested them, this is the work they got done. I think the other question that comes up is that scaling, like, how are you scaling this? Are you doing enough across the state of Oregon? Are you doing it where you have partners who wanna work with you and do this work like up in Northwest Oregon? And so I think that those are the pieces, and so, you know, I can leave this conversation because Stu and I have talked about, there's a lot of different things. It can be the 20-year strategy for resiliency, it can be climate change. There's several different large level policy pieces that we just need to drive into everyday work that we do in consideration. And I think the climate change piece, we have a building block that into the forest management plan for state forest. But instead of been doing all this stuff for over a year, it's like we have these high policy things that how do we drive into the structure we have, rather than having a separate person doing this or that. But I think the reporting piece is different.
It's also appropriate, for you to be able to have that kind of conversation they have here, what you guys are saying. By the way, I just want to say, you know, you're not gonna get beat that for doing it. I'll be that.
Bids on the iron maybe.
Yeah.
So, relative to all of the things you just mentioned, to build some of these high-level policy, these things was the actions. Sitting here looking at Joy, wondering, is this vision document one of those that should be baked into every grant, and if so, how? So that will be to enter into that discussion now, but
Yeah.
that's, you know, big work for everyone.
Had a conversation yesterday with, some people that are on the older side. And we're joking about, you know, thinking that old people posted notes everywhere, remind themselves. I said, well, you know, if I can find posted notes. I can do that.
Like I said.
We're ready to that.
Okay.
Chair Kelly, just a quick point, about the logistics for the tour tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there's been some conflicting information on the start time of that. My understanding is that the ODF sign up sheet started that loading the vans at maybe at 9 in the morning tomorrow. So just wanted to clarify that here at PB Hall. So talking with Seth and Megan here, it sounds like that's a consensus on the other side of the ODF sign up sheet for that. Like that.
So we are 9 o'clock, right?
9 o'clock.
And it's clear.
And talk wheels up.
Yeah, wheels up.
Yeah.
It should be enough 8:30-ish to,
I
you know,
believe the
9, the vans will be leaving.
That, the vans will be out back or?
Well, whatever I think is easiest, has that been worked out with Matt previously?
So we had, when I met with Josh and Matt, they actually requested that we meet at 8 AM, leave at 8:30 AM.
I think some of the confusion is coming from the ODF sign up sheet that showed a departure of 9.
Yeah,
So
it got,
we're
it,
leaving,
yeah,
some people
it
are
got-
potentially
yeah.
signing up.
Okay.
That. Kind of stuff with that.
So knowing that there might be some places that will have to be removed from the tour.
Yeah, I think they've already thought that.
We've already figured that out, yeah.
Okay.
The question though still is where will the van?
The vans will, so the plan is for the drivers to pick up the vans in the morning. And we'll all meet out in this parking lot, because the plan was to, there's a brief meeting and sign up in down in the, like, when you entry into the building.
Meet there before.
That's what the itinerary said, yes.
Park in that parking lot out this way.
So anybody parking on campus at Oregon State, your personal vehicles, you can park anywhere in lot B or C with a permit. And the board of the vans, the motor pool vans that we reserved from OSU are going to be downstairs in that parking lot. So we're supposed to, if we're leaving at 9, we'll need to meet at 8:30 and then depart at 9. Right.
Yeah, in the lobby.
Because I have to make sure everybody has signed the waivers and that kind of stuff.
Are you still planning on going to Harlan first?
Yes, yeah.
And Megan's getting lit back. Somebody from.
Yeah, I won't personally, but I will in charge of that, so.
All right. And I will be here tomorrow, but Tim is gonna take over and I really will need the answer.
Well.
This isn't.
Would you like it?
Yes.